Hello, podcast listeners. This episode features Mikey Sunram, who is a master of all things Godzilla related. We're going to talk about books. We're going to talk about soundtracks. We're going to talk about movies. We're going to talk about festivals, all having to do with that big green monster Godzilla and his best friends and his baby as well, which Tucker brings up right away in this podcast. Plus, Tucker and I talk about those things that are precious to you that are stupid pieces of junk to everybody else. All this and more on this episode of JJ Meets World.
1, 2, 3, 4. JJ Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones, in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is. He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. JJ has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled, and he's fun and then he twirls as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprained. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called JJ Meets World.
My grandmother invented Chex Mix before Chex Mix invented Chex Mix. We've called it scrambles in my family for a long time. Scrambles. It's rice Chex, corn Chex, wheat Chex, pretzel sticks, cashews if it's been a good year financially for you, peanuts if it hasn't, and then Cheerios. My mother added Parmesan Goldfish crackers and bits of garlic bagel chips. And I guess what the point I'm trying to make here is I want to know where the Chex company gets off saying that they invented Chex Mix.
Well, it sounds like they did, because what your grandma invented was scrambles.
Yeah, and then all they did was take it, and they're like, you pop it in the microwave. You bake scrambles.
Yeah.
The mixture that you use it's like a full pound of butter.
Are you saying that the Chex Mix box that has the recipe on the side calls for it to be microwaved?
It does.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
I'll have to double check that. Double Chex Mix that.
Checks it. Checks it out. There's even a commercial.
That was the political movement in Czechoslovakia to
Chex Mix
to leave the United Nations, or what is it called? The European Union?
The
Chex
EU. There's a commercial because for a while the Peanuts, Charles Schultz's Peanuts, was a spokesperson for Chex Mix. And so there's a bit where they show them microwaving a bowl of Chex Mix. And
okay.
It's like, you couldn't even mess this up, Charlie Brown.
Well,
and Charlie Brown tries his best. Okay? Why are everyone gets pissed off at him when he has to impromptu do a Thanksgiving dinner and it's like candied beans, candy beans, jelly beans.
Doesn't make sense to ask
popcorn,
a child with alopecia to make you your snack.
Right. And then Peppermint Patty, she's wearing flip-flops and sandals over Thanksgiving weekend.
Unsanitary.
So I just don't know where they get off. And so if someone from the Chex Corporation could get a hold of me and we could right this wrong, I sure would appreciate it.
I would be interested. Can you give us a timeline as to what year roughly you'd say your grandmother, quote, invented, unquote, scrambles?
I'm going to say early 1950s.
And Chex Mix was around then?
I don't know.
Well, then how could she have done it if there was no Chex Mix?
Because there was no Chex Mix at the time. Chex Mix came in the 70s when everyone was lazy, looking for things that they could bring to key parties because they were all sex starved.
But the reason we call it Chex Mix is because it has Chex in it.
Yeah.
And so where was she getting those Chex if they didn't exist?
No, Chex existed. Chex cereal has existed for a long time.
I see. Okay.
And then the mixing of them, hold on, let me Google this real quick.
I'm interested in listeners out there, if you have a Nana who's been doing this before JJ's Nana, please
First of all,
let us know.
I don't call her my Nana.
Well, you didn't call her that. I did.
No, and she's been dead for years, so thanks for bringing that up.
She's your dead Nana.
Okay.
We all got dead Nanas in our closet.
A couple of them. So according to Wikipedia, Chex Mix is a type of snack mix that includes Chex breakfast cereal, sold by General Mills, as a major component. There are commercially sold pre-made varieties of Chex Mix, as well as many recipes, often printed on Chex boxes for homemade Chex Mix. Though contents vary, the mixes generally include an assortment of Chex, chips, hard breadsticks, pretzels, nuts, or crackers. History. Wheat Chex was introduced in 1937 and rice Chex in 1950. In 1952, an advertisement for Chex Party Mix appeared in Life magazine. So, as long as good old Barb Dawson can predate 1952.
Yeah, but you were born...
One could even say that they stole it from her.
You were born in 82, right?
83.
83. So, I mean, how you would have no firsthand knowledge of what your grandma was doing in 1952.
I have recipe cards.
That are
pictures.
dated?
Yeah.
That are dated?
Okay. Your recipe cards aren't dated?
I don't have recipe cards.
Okay, so all of our recipe cards are dated.
Okay.
And I think they're dated because you know who they came from based off of what date it is. And my aunt's, well, my Aunt Ginny's a pretty good cook, but I think for the most part, my grandmother's recipe book was handed down to my mother.
Okay.
And then my mother handed down the recipe book to me. So that's where I get my amazing recipe for rhubarb cream cake. It's also where I get my recipe for my very popular raw stuffing.
You know, that's something that we don't hear about very often anymore, are recipes that get handed down from family member to family member. Like, this is how one member of our family made these back in the day, and we're keeping this recipe here in
alive.
Line. Yeah.
I think that that's something that we're missing out because we're all watching tasty videos.
Yeah, I mean, we're used to thinking like swords in Game of Thrones, that's what it is to bequeath something to the next generation. But really, your Nana's scrambles recipe is like your Valyrian steel sword.
When my grandmother on my dad's side, my grandma Alice, passed away, the one thing that people really were clamoring for was this silly little light up Christmas tree that hung on my grandmother's wall from Thanksgiving to Christmas. Nothing special about it. In fact, the cord probably was a fire hazard at this point, but everyone wanted that. Number 2 on the list was my grandma's turkey roaster. Just an old school turkey roaster that probably used more electricity than it needed, but it got that turkey done on time every single year. So
if you had a Valyrian steel sword in your family, I think it would be called scrambles.
Oh, it would, without a doubt. Or either that or that's what our dire wolf would be called. This is our dire wolf scrambles.
He's a miniature poodle.
More things should be handed down that can be tweaked as time goes on. If you inherit a piece of furniture or a dress, most of those things you can't really do much with. You might try and take in a wedding dress in a way, but most people don't want to change it for fear of ghosts.
Yeah. Yep.
But wouldn't it be nice if we handed down more things that could be changed and tweaked a little bit as generations go by?
Do you own anything now that wasn't owned by previous generations? You were the original owner that you are planning on bequeathing to your children?
Bequeathing or bequeathing?
Dealer's choice.
Okay, I will bequeath. When I was in first grade, I got a teddy bear named Ted E. Bear. And
real original.
I know, right? He came from Macy's. Well, it's Dayton's at the time. And I will bequeath Ted E. Bear to the next generation. He's had some tough times, but he still looks pretty good.
Yeah.
And I love that bear.
It's
been a long time. Well, I wonder where that bear is.
I had a blue stuffed bunny rabbit. Was the sort of my very first possession on this earth. I got it the day I was born, and it was the toy that they were giving out at McDonald's at the time.
Yeah,
was that they had a blue one for boys and a pink one for girls because it was 1985. And my dad...
The day you were born was 1995?
85, I said.
You said 1995.
I said 1985. I also said bequeath.
No,
and you have been mishearing me.
Let's pause. We're going to pause this and go back and just listen real quick.
Okay, we'll be right back.
JJ Meets World.
Okay, we're back.
Well, you've probably gone back and listened yourself and found out that Tucker did say 1995.
I said 85.
Nope, he said 1995.
Oh, nice try. Nice try, you son of a bitch. But yeah, so like Dad went to McDonald's and got me my first childhood possession, and I've got that somewhere. It's in storage somewhere.
Yeah. So is that something you're going to give to the next generation?
I guess so, yeah. I mean, I've got a pretty good comic book collection that if any of my children... I have any interest in comics, they'll get it. But yeah, I don't know.
What if your children are only interested in sports?
That's cool. That's their prerogative.
They're like, God, I wish my
They
dad
don't.
had a
They don't exist
a
yet.
football signed by Brett Favre.
They
and
don't
not this
exist yet. But I'm
stupid
talking about them as if they're here.
Wolverine comic instead. Gah.
I think I would maybe get a paternity test at that point.
Yeah.
That wouldn't make any sense.
Turns out it's Brett Favre's son.
Unless
your wife was
I marry
stripping
like
Brett Favre.
Dallas cheerleader or something, and that's why they get into sports.
The reason that I'm not a foster parent is because I don't think that child services would come into my house and be cool with the fact that I've got so many toys I don't intend on letting children play with. I had children stay at my home recently, and I had to hide all of my toys so that they wouldn't get their slobbery, germy, grubby hands
That
on
is
them.
specifically an our generation problem.
Certainly is.
Overwhelmingly an our generation problem.
I have the whole Playmobil Ghostbusters collection. I don't want them taking a piece with them or losing it. Come on, or putting it in their mouth. Why do kids put stuff in their mouths all the time?
You know, because you're going to be starting a family in the relatively near future, you're going to have to start getting toys that aren't going to be for you, JJ. You understand that, right?
I
Yeah.
don't like that idea.
I know. You know who also though has a very impressive figurine collection.
Our guest today,
Absolutely.
Mikey Sunram.
Look at that.
First and foremost, if you're not interested in Godzilla, listen to this podcast because I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised at how interesting the subject of Godzilla and giant monsters are. I was so entertained by it, knowing very little, that I went home and watched some of the trailers that we talk about in this, and I was like, dang, I can't wait to see this.
Yeah, Mikey Sunram, a very close friend of mine, a fellow member at Theater B, one of the sweetest people you'll ever meet, and he has been a lifelong Godzilla fanatic. And I've liked Godzilla since I was a kid, but my knowledge never went nearly as deep as Mikey's does, and he was the one I would usually turn to if I had a Godzilla question. So this is a Godzilla deep dive episode.
He goes to a Godzilla festival, G-Fest. So that's how deep it is. And he brought stacks of books.
Yeah.
And he
The
brought,
most prepared guest we've ever had.
without a doubt. In fact, you'll note that during this, he mentions, look at this book. And Tucker does a pretty good job of saying, and he hands to JJ a book. And so when we post this on Facebook, the original posting, we'll have to include a bunch of the links to the photos and the books and the trailers so that you guys can see what it is. But you could become instantly a master of the Godzilla art, the art of Godzilla-ing. It's going to be a lot of fun. So listen, folks, get ready, get excited. Of course, we've got a new Godzilla movie coming out, this summer?
I think so.
The summer of 2019. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this podcast that we have prepared for you with none other than the Godzilla, the king of all Godzilla nerds, Mikey Sunram.
Was that Chewbacca?
That was supposed to be a Godzilla roar, but I just really couldn't really get it there.
JJ Meets World.
Mikey Sunram is the guest in the studio today. Very excited. We were going to try and have you on earlier, but you were at a Godzilla convention and unavailable.
Yes.
So let's dive into this immediately. You're a huge fan of the giant monster Godzilla.
Yes.
Do you view Godzilla as a hero or a villain?
I don't know. He can be all things to all people. He's been different things throughout the years, depending on what the movie was and what the culture of at the time was. So he's just kind of.
I've heard people described Christ the same way.
And just like Christ, Godzilla died for our sins.
Yes.
Oh, yes, our radioactive nuclear sins.
Well, how about when you first, as a kid, when you first got into Godzilla, what was your perception of him then?
Well, when I was a kid, I was always, I loved, you're a boy, you're full of vim and vigor and piss and vinegar and you just love fantastical things. And I loved dinosaurs. I loved like anything to do with like lost worlds full of like ancient giant creatures and all that crazy crap. And then when I actually got into Godzilla and all the giant monsters, not just dinosaurs. I mean, these are like things that destroy cities and people running in horror.
Dinosaurs have only messed up theme parks.
Yeah. Yes.
Except in Lost World.
That's pussy
With
stuff.
Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah.
That's-
Well, I mean, technically, I guess you could call it a maintenance facility. They messed up a maintenance facility.
Theme parks are pussy stuff. We're going big, go big or go home.
If I remember correctly, there is a Godzilla gag when the T-Rex is let
In the
loose
second
in,
one,
in
correct.
New
Yep,
York.
in Lost
No,
World.
Or is it
San Diego?
San Diego,
Yeah,
sorry.
in the Lost World. There's Japanese people running from it, and I go, ho, ho, ho. Okay, I get it.
There's also a gag when someone crashes their car into a Blockbuster Video. There is an ad for an adaptation of King Lear starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. So,
Yeah.
do you remember how old you were when you first got into Godzilla specifically?
When I was a wee little tyke in the mid and late 70s.
Where'd you grow up?
My hometown is actually east of here. It's a town called Audubon, Minnesota, and it is not home to a certain bar with well endowed women. JJ. Mhm.
Yep. Thank you for looking at me like that. Well,
I don't know if anybody will catch what that means.
Audubon happened to be the halfway point between my lake cabin and Fargo. So
okay.
we had many a drop off.
Okay.
And then that led to many a tall tale.
Yes.
So correct me if I'm wrong, Audubon, it's not like a bustling metropolis that would have a bunch of great video stores with bootlegs of Godzilla stuff, or even an old theater that showed Godzilla flicks.
It's a semi-village. To get technical, actually, me and my brother Dan, I only have one older brother. We were raised in Audubon. My mom and dad grew up around the Detroit Lakes, Cormorant, Pelican Rapids, Audubon Place. But me and my brother were born in Dover, Delaware. My dad was.
Oh my God, I've been to Dover. They have an amazing Outback Steakhouse, and they're home to a huge.
They have an amazing Outback Steakhouse.
They do.
The Outback Steakhouse in Dover's way better than the ones in other places.
So let me tell you why. It is adjacent to a NASCAR track. One of the biggest NASCAR tracks is in Dover, and people go crazy for it.
Yeah.
I happened to be there on the day of a race, and so it's got a lot of race stuff.
So you're saying an Outback Steakhouse's quality goes up because of its proximity to a place where cars go fast?
Yes.
Okay, I was just wondering. That's good to know.
So yeah, my dad in the years ago he was in the Air Force, and then he, for whatever reason, I can't remember what my parents told me. He went out there he was a cop out there. So we lived out, but my brother was born out there. I was born out there, but they wanted, as soon as we got to where we would start going to school, we moved back in 70. They moved back technically in 75. And then we
left you guys in Dover to polish off
Suck
the apartment.
it up, boys. It's going to be a hard one. Right? Moved back. We lived on a farm east. I'm getting the east wrong.
Yeah, that's fine.
East of Audubon?
Eastbound and down. So east of Audubon, we lived on a farm for a few years before we moved into the actual city. And and that's when my brother started going to school. He's like 4 years older than I am. And we lived on this farm, and it was a couple things. I don't know where it was a combination. I'm trying to remember what was first. It was, in the library, in the old library.
Yeah.
Mikey's handing this book to JJ right now.
This is the actual book. There was a ton of these old books from Crestwood House by this guy named Ian Thorne. There was really simplistic books about they were all orangey, and they were all
it is from the school library in Audubon. It's stamped. Yeah. So did you steal this?
I checked that thing out more than any time. That became like my Book of Mormon.
That is a well-loved book.
It
yes,
is.
you can tell.
And my friends say, why are you always checking out that book? Jeez, there's other books in this library.
It's also in the Library of Congress. It has a Library of Congress catalog card number.
Wow.
So when Lake Park and Audubon joined, a lot of the books in the elementary library got, in the Audubon library got gotten rid of. But one of my best friends, Kelly, his mom worked in the library, and she kind of liked Godzilla and all that. And so she saved that for me and said, Mike, here's that book. And I'll go, so it was that. So you got that book. So it was a combination of that. And then years ago, and then my mom and dad, maybe that was first, because eventually my mom and dad, they would, how back in the day there was kids, like all kinds of little radio, like records on vinyl that had little adventures of stories. I got this when I got this record of some adventure with Casper the Ghost. But I also got this. It was these two. I never really looked online to see the origin of this, but it was this thing.
Okay.
These two, you can find them on YouTube.
It's an album called Godzilla King of the Monsters.
There are these two wacky old radio plays. They're like 13 minutes. When you're a kid, that means like it lasts an hour because you just don't want it to end. But I got it on vinyl.
Oh boy!
With this old picture. This is the late 70s, and I used to have.
It's the same cover art too from the CD you handed me.
Well, actually, that's
the album.
That cover art is when Marvel Comics did their Godzilla comics, and that was from issue number 1, which I also have.
Excellent.
By the way,
got it backed and boarded and everything.
Oh yeah, backed and boarded. And I found it was pristine. I got it in the old comics way down on South University. Shop.
Comic Junction.
Yeah.
In this picture you handed me, so it's you and your brother, and it's obviously Christmas morning.
Yep, it was.
You have one hell of a flocked Christmas tree behind there.
Yeah,
I mean,
yes,
there's
that's out on
very
the farm.
little organic material left.
Yep, that's back in the day. Real Christmas trees.
And it looks like your brother scored like a cassette tape player and recorder. And look at that chump now, huh? I bet he's not using that, but I bet you still have your Godzilla album.
For Christmas, I actually bought him another, because now retro arcade games are back in fashion.
Yeah.
I bought him another one of those old football games.
Did you really?
For Christmas last year.
Okay, I'm sorry. So keep going. So
that's what it's all about. And
so you started discovering Godzilla stuff. Had you seen one of the movies yet, or was this all?
I didn't see my first Godzilla movie. All I knew about was that record, this book, and also the old Hanna-Barbera Godzilla cartoon that ran for 2 seasons back on NBC back in 78 and 79.
Was that with his son Gatsuki?
Yes.
Okay.
That was the Hanna-Barbera. That was the first Americanized version of Godzilla. Very Hanna-Barbera, but it was the drawing.
Would am I saying it right? Godzuki?
Godzuki.
Godzuki.
And Godzuki, and he flies with little wings.
So was Godzuki kind of like the Scrappy Doo of the
Well, he was
Godzilla?
voiced by Don Messick, who was the voice of.
Yeah,
it was yeah,
really
late great Don Messick,
I didn't know that.
and he'd go. He does all these smoke rings and everything.
Is he just sleeping somewhere, like in the Hanna-Barbera studios, and they're like, "Wake Don up! We need another voice. Just go, someone go wake Don up."
Well, I mean, he did he was like one of those.
He's kind of like a Frank Welker. He
did
just
Frank
voices
Welker,
for
Don
everything.
Messick, John Stevenson, and all those old greats. That's another little fetish of mine, like all the old cartoons and voice actors, because that was always kind of a dream job of mine as well.
Here's a little tidbit for you. So my favorite movie commentary of all time is Gremlins, the one with the cast, and it's informative, it's funny, it's just great. Howie Mandel, who was the voice of Gizmo in Gremlins.
What?
Wow.
Yeah. He hops on and he talks about how it was one of his first major paychecks for him, and he was like, "Oh, I need this so bad." His stand-up career hadn't really taken off yet, and Frank Welker pulled him in and said, "Listen, this is the thing." And so he's sitting there, and his audition sheet is him going, bright light, and he has no idea what this movie's about. Well, They found out how green he was, and they got him to sign a contract where he recorded the foreign language versions as well. So he'd be sitting in the studio there, he'd be like, bright light, and brie klieken, and he'd get the German one, and then he got, the French one. And so he goes, it wasn't until after that I found out, they pay you more for that. Anyway, those are small monsters. We're talking about big monsters.
Yeah, the biggins.
So
that was that. And then just first Godzilla movie I ever saw was the American version of King Kong versus Godzilla.
Oh, yeah.
From Universal, released by Universal in 1963. And here's the thing, though. It was around when we had HBO at the time, and I was down in my basement. I wanted to see this. It was my first Godzilla, actually, after seeing these books and everything. But Porky's was on HBO at the same time, so I was flicking back and forth. Because my young self was interested in other things.
Yep. So now when you watch Godzilla or King Kong
That's
versus
the
Godzilla,
only way to
you get
watch King Kong
slightly
versus
aroused.
Godzilla.
Yeah, you get slightly aroused during it.
So King Kong versus Godzilla was actually my second Godzilla movie I ever saw, and I just got them on VHS tape.
Mm-hmm.
The first one I had was Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, but renamed the Cosmic Monster in that particular release. King Kong versus Godzilla after that, and then years later, Mikey and I had already been friends for a while. I knew he was a big Godzilla guy. Anytime I had questions about anything, like, this is the dude I'd talk to. And then one day he comes in and he hands me this VHS tape, and I open it, and it's the Japanese version of King Kong versus Godzilla with like a bootleg
subtitle.
one.
It's a subtitle because, that's a long story about, like, the Japanese version will probably never. It has to do with rights and in perpetuity kind of.
It's so weird. But so I watched that one, and I go, this is a completely different movie than what I've been watching since I was a kid.
The movie's actually a comedy. It's a satire.
Whole scenes are gone. Like, all these things that made no sense to me as a kid suddenly make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Stock footage of, like, atomic bomb.
Well, and what did they do to Americanize? I mean, they shot footage of, like, an American news anchor. Right?
This is Eric Carter with the news. And it was. Yeah, and it was these American scenes, and it's like Godzilla has a brain about this size, while Kong is a thinking animal. It was all these Americanized with this folded, like, you can see the creases in the map. Attention has been looking toward the Arctic Sea, and where icebergs have been melting. And it's just all these American things, and the music. Only one part of that original score by Akira Ifukube is in that movie. It's all stock footage.
In the Americanized version?
Yeah. Okay. It's replaced with stock music from other Universal movies, Creature from Black Lagoon and Kronos, and only one part of that original score is left in the American version. It was the island scene where Kong gets drunk, falls down, and they're chanting, King Kong, King Kong.
And I remember feeling really special about some of the female islanders, because
they go Japanese.
They go to this island that Kong lives on,
Faroe Island,
and there are people just who are indigenous to the island, who are all Japanese actors who worship King Kong.
Yes,
and the ladies were very pretty, and young Tucker was like, I want to go to Faroe Island because that seems sweet. And then he fights an octopus, which crawls out of the ocean, and the villagers are first fighting him, and then King Kong comes in and does it.
Yes, and I remember what you said. It made you sick.
Made me sick one time. I was sick with the flu, and I wanted to watch something, so I put that movie on. I had already seen it a few times, but something about the texture of the octopus and like how sticky it was and the sound effects, I couldn't get through.
There was a real one, and then there was a fake one. And also, by the way, the real one that they used, they ate it after they were done. By the way,
I'd believe.
Yeah, I heard that was what they were going to do with Ghostbusters 2, but Dan Aykroyd was like, "Stop eating me! Stop putting that fork in me."
Anyway, so that was that, and then eventually, I began to see other movies little by little. I mean, I watched the original Gojira and Rodan on my neighbor's Laserdiscs.
Nice.
Laserdiscs.
So over time, and all kinds of fans can tell you about this. A part of growing up as a fan of all this craziness is you get a hold of the upcoming TV guide and you scour and see it's like, are there any good movies that I haven't seen yet? I know all these movies names, all the names and all the plots, but I don't know. I've never seen these. So it's like, oh, Godzilla on versus Gigantus tonight. Okay, I've never seen that. So
that's actually leading me into a thought kind of attached to it that I've actually been thinking about for a while. I used to watch movies all the time. Loved watching movies. Now I bet I watch 2-3 movies in a year. It's really gone downhill.
Yeah.
And part of me is wondering about the fact that I have so much access, so much instantaneous access to movies right now that finding ones and watching them isn't as fun. Whereas at that time, you're like, well, what's available? There's 2 options. There's what's on TV tonight,
and what's at the store,
or to rent. And so I kind of wonder what you guys think about having too much selection does to it.
I actually don't have any streaming right now, but I mean, I have all the movies in my fingertips, Blu-ray. Whereas, back in the day, you either had to wait until it was on TV,
make a TV tape of it,
on TV and
TNT at like 4:45 in the morning.
Yep, or on both coasts, they had the tonight and the 4:30 afternoon movie, or some marathons that you'd see on some holiday. But when a movie you haven't seen before appears at a video store on VHS when VHS tapes were like pretty damn expensive.
So okay, let me ask you this: you're someone who obviously cultivates a collection when it comes to Godzilla.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you have at one point did you have a giant shelf full of VHS tapes that you had taped off television, gotten dupes of? And...
I've in the past I taped stuff off of TV, and then eventually there was one where you could buy the actual movies, the TV prints, pan and scan, and all that. And then if you're lucky, in the late 90s, when a few of them actually come out on widescreen. I mean, that was that's when those widescreen VHSs, they were expensive.
And I remember getting a gift of a movie I wanted, and they got me the full screen version. I'd like
son of a bitch,
I want the widescreen version. They'd go, but that means they're cutting out the top and the bottom. And
no,
I'm like,
it doesn't.
No, it doesn't.
You idiots.
Gives me all riled
So
up.
okay, so then did you have a DVD? Did you have? And you've got Blu-ray now.
Yeah,
I mean,
because that's kind of a sub part of the fandom, and as well, when these movies eventually, because these movies were just when they first came out in American in the theater or straight to television, they were under different groups and people owned them, and then they'd go back. The film prints would go back in the library, or they'd go back to the studio where they were Americanized, and then the ownership of these film libraries changed hands, and so eventually these movies came out underneath different video labels throughout the years, and so there's a fandom I got a hold of that Canadian VHS of Godzilla versus the Sea Monster with the original The End font at the, that kind of.
You've got someone out there who's like, I've got the Japanese version with the American subtitles. Oh yeah, well I've got the Americanized dialogue with the Japanese subtitles.
Yeah, all that craziness, and there's even a Facebook. There's a Facebook group where where when films like newer versions of films are coming out, or older films or newer Blu-rays of older films. It's a group called Kaiju and Tokusatsu on home video, and it's a Facebook group, and kind of about trading back and forth news and stories about. But anyway, I do have, eventually I would upgrade, and eventually these movies, as foreign movies, became a thing where Criterion and all that, they see them in widescreen, see them under their uncut and their subtitle, everything. There was a demand in the fandom for these films to see them in the way they originally were presented, widescreen, uncut, subtitled, best quality picture. And now we got them, but now there's this kind of retrograde. Sorry, I'm
No, keep
Well,
going.
too much of a tangent.
That's what
There's
this
been a
podcast is about. Our tangents. Go for it.
Tangential. Right on. Okay. There was
We're hoping to record in Tangiers one day.
plenty of tangerines. God, so stupid.
We just got a tangent on the tangent.
Yes.
Okay, let's go.
Tangeray. What were we talking?
So you're talking about like the retro.
There's
version,
a retro movement of people who know, like Tucker, know video editing and they want to. They try to. It's like, well, we don't want to lose these Americanized versions of these films, you know, because some of these movies they're Americanized by a group, and they're dubbed, you know, professionally in America, but some of these Japanese studios like Toho and Daiei, they produce their own dubs, dubbed in Japan or Hong Kong. In the fandom, they're called the international English dubs.
Oh,
And these were English versions that were made to other American-speaking territories, not America, like Britain or Australia and all that. And they would send them over to America, and a lot of these distributors would be like, God, these dubs are freaking awful. So they would dub them themselves. But some of those dubs actually did get through. Like you mentioned Godzilla versus the Cosmic Monster.
yeah.
That was distributed by this kind of low outfit B movie outfit called Cinema Shares. And they just edited the movie and changed the title.
Okay.
They did, but they kept the dub.
That's sort of a weird thing that happened a lot anytime basically a movie was exported from the East to the West. There would be some sort of meddling with it, and you know, Bruce Lee films really have the mark of that on there, because the actual order of the movies that Bruce Lee made, he made The Big Boss, and then
Then it got turned into
something else, and they switched different words around, and then he did Way of the Dragon, which actually got released after Enter the Dragon in America, so they called it Return of the Dragon, but it was made years before, and
Fist of Fury and all.
Yeah, so a bunch of us who are fans of these pieces of culture that come out of the East, and we're growing up on the Americanized version of it, we don't realize what we're missing out on until you're able to join a community of diehards that can join into it. I kind of wanted to cover this too. You know, obviously Godzilla would be, I would say, at the epicenter of your fandom. But I mean, you really have a lot of knowledge over any of these giant sort of monster genre concepts that were coming out, like ended up becoming the Power Rangers, that kind of stuff. You've got some knowledge of all that. Not as much as this, but you're definitely the person who I go to ask questions about that.
I mean, when you think about it, Power Rangers is just part of that obsession with the giant monster genre.
Yeah, that's a Super Sentai genre. Yeah, that recently when Saban turned that into the Power Rangers, that recently had a 25th anniversary recently.
Yeah, that's right.
But
God, I feel old.
I know.
Yeah. But I mean, it was not the first Super Sentai series of like colored people on fighting all these crazy, more like human-sized alien mutants and monsters. Eventually they would get into the, you know, giant robots and all that. But Shout Factory in the last few years, what they've been doing, they've been putting out the original Japanese versions of all these Power Rangers series that came out one after another in America in that line. They've been doing these like Zua Ranger and Dino Ranger and all these other, they're
There's all these subgenres of the Power Rangers.
Yes. They've been putting out in these big box sets over the last few years, Shout Factory.
Yeah.
The way these shows originally were in Japan for fans. And so, I mean, there are fans of the Americanized version. There's a Morphicon. There is a convention called Morphicon, for Power Rangers fans. But I haven't checked them out. But I mean, I think it's cool that Shout Factory has done that. They've done that for a lot of other Japanese stuff. A few years ago, they did all the old Gamera films. They did other shows, Ultra Q and Ultra 7. And some other stuff like the original versions, Japanese subtitled.
So when they made Power Rangers, like the Power Rangers I watched after school,
The very first one with Kimberly, the pink one with the nice tush.
Yes, the Pink Ranger.
Yes,
one.
and I am I'm a pig, I know, but I mean,
I've
I
got
thought
a huge crush.
she had a nice tush.
You and
I
every
got a
other
huge
boy in America in second
So
grade.
here's a question: Were
I don't know if I'll know it.
was there a Japanese version of this that existed beforehand, and they
Yes.
took the fight sequences?
Yeah, and then
and then just so really when Kimberly Joe Johnson is in there, all she really has to do is act for a third of that. It gets spliced in with the other, and then they just dub her over.
Yeah, that there's all the action and then all the creatures and that evil.
What a genius way of making a television show. You're cutting your production budget in
barely
half.
paid those actors anything in the U.S. But you could also tell, I mean, as a kid, I'd watch it and go, wow, Jason's more muscular when he is not in his Ranger costume. And then when he's in his Ranger's costume, he's really skinny. It was I believe the Yellow Ranger was actually a male Ranger in Japan.
Yep.
But they made a female character in the U.S. And that was probably like the fifth or sixth iteration of the Super Sentai characters, right?
Oh, God.
Or genre. I mean, it wasn't even the first version of that genre.
That went all way back to like 1975. Zua Ranger, which is became the first Power Rangers. That was the late 80s, 87. I want to say 87, 88. You can look it up.
Got it.
It's easy to find, but like, if you ever go to Shout Factory's webs or their video online store, I mean, you can see there's like 5 or 6 box sets out now of all the original versions of all these old Super Sentai. So.
Let's talk about how they take things that we love and ruin them. So,
anything in particular?
I will say this. So if I'm thinking about watching a Godzilla movie and I want to watch one of the earlier Godzilla movies, I actually don't want to watch a pristine, cleaned up version. I would rather watch a VHS tape version.
Full screen?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
Okay.
not, it doesn't have to be full screen, but I want it to be a little gritty and a little dirty, and I want a little...
The way you remember
tape.
watching it.
Yeah. I gotta have that nostalgia too. I still have some videotapes. Yeah.
And there's just certain things I prefer to watch in that lower grade version, and partially it's because the higher we go in resolution, the more cracks you're going to see, the more zippers you're going to be able to point out. So there's a magic.
The string theory. You see the wires. You will see wires on these Blu-rays. I'm like, wow, that's the best I've ever seen this movie. And wow, boy, you can really see the wires,
right?
Which in a way I don't really mind.
I mean, you can tell. Like,
It's like,
guy in a suit.
I mean, when you're a kid, I thought, wow, this is, but
the neatest thing.
But also you can also see a lot of the detail in the craft of these people put in. I mean, that's a story in itself about people who don't get these films, are not into them, and you don't have to, if it's not your thing, that's fine. But I mean, they say, cardboard buildings. That's a phrase that really rankles people's hide in the fandom. It's like a lot of these craftsmen, there's working lights in these buildings, and they're like individual little roof shingles on these houses. I mean, they're not just. I mean, some movie shows in the 70s, and went kind of the cheap route and had kind of not as detailed buildings and all that.
Well, part of the fandom seems to be like a true fan like you who legitimately loves this stuff. You don't just love Godzilla, you love everything about it. Like, you love the design of a certain suit and the fact that it is a suit and that, it looks different from a certain time and they only had this kind, like, you're appreciating every aspect of the genre.
Yeah.
And that's really cool.
There is a craft to it. Fans that's kind of the gospel we're trying to preach sometimes.
There's a reason why the folks at Pixar and Aardman revere the Godzilla movies in a way, because the whole crew was involved in creating. I mean, you weren't just creating the rubber suit that Godzilla is in. You're creating the village. You're creating, the special effects behind it. There's a whole world.
There is a beautiful painted backdrops. I mean, you can see in some of these films. I mean, and you talk about wires. I mean, if you got a bunch of monsters at the same time, you have to kind of coordinate things, because you got wires all screwed up. I mean, there when you're doing some certain shots. I mean, and you got explosions too.
Yep.
You got fireworks. You got giant fire.
You're working on a set that is built above. So like there's your ground, right? There's the floor.
Yep.
The set is actually built up above the floor so that you can get underneath and manipulate stuff underneath.
If you need to. Yep.
Plus, there's rigging above it that's holding things up. So you're not. If we made a movie in here right now, we're all sitting on the actual floor. We don't need to worry about it. You know, we just gotta make sure we don't get the boom in the shot. But when you're making a Godzilla movie, when you're making one of these creature features, there's so much more that goes into it that is part of that art. One of the coolest things I've ever seen from the golden age of movie making, well, depending on your definition of golden age, but it's a 5x9 painting that was done of London for Mary Poppins. And so it's a backdrop, right? Well, and intricate, super intricate. It shows the whole city of London. And one of the aspects that they did with it is they took these little tiny itty bitty pins and they pinpricked areas all over the map. And then they would lights behind it. And then all of a sudden it looked like it was transitioning from day to night. And then there's all the lights flickering from the windows. And cool. That's not something you add just with just like an afterthought. Somebody had to go in there and make every single one of those little pinpricks in it. And not that movies today aren't great, but I think that there's something completely different with someone poring over a backdrop like that for 3 months versus somebody sitting down in front of a computer and being able to digitize it, not touch it and feel it and have imperfections. Imperfections show the craftsmanship. We were talking about in Wallace and Gromit, the reason Aardman don't get rid of the fingerprints is because they want you to know a human being repositioned this themselves.
And if anything, losing it's almost like I think the fandom, especially fans like you, in a large way, you are pop culture historians because you're talking about films that will never be made that way again, and styles of art and craftsmanship that does not get used anymore just because different tools have supplanted them. And I think it's actually really important from a cultural standpoint to go back and remember how all these things were made and be able to appreciate. Like, I like watching Return of the Jedi partially because I like a lot of the matte paintings that they have in there. And you can tell they're matte paintings, but you can tell when something is CG as well, right? It's not about how realistic it is. It's about finding, an appreciation for this art form. It definitely goes that deep. Mikey, there was I in my Godzilla VHS collection growing up, my dad also got me this VHS tape called Hollywood Monsters.
Oh, yep.
Or Hollywood Dinosaurs, I think is what it was called.
I know of it.
It was a collection of, it was basically a documentary talking about all these different old movies that used dinosaur animatronics and the Godzilla stuff, and they
forced perspective with just a lizard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They showed a trailer for a movie that I've never seen and have always wanted to see it since I was a kid, called Destroy All Monsters. And it was, to me, it seemed so cool because it was called Damn.
Yep.
DAM, and I thought that was cool that what I thought was a swear word was the title of this movie.
No, don't lie. You just loved holding back water.
Holding back water right now. At what point in the genre were there suddenly enough creatures that they could make a movie like that?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because this past August 1st marked the 50th anniversary of that film, Kaiju So Shingeki. It came out on August 1st, 1968, and that was at G-Fest this year. They did a panel about the 50th anniversary, and there was a downstairs place with around Artist Alley. They had several display rooms. One of them was for Destroy All Monsters. You can see the pictures up on my Facebook. When I put up a ton of pictures when I was down there back in July. They had like all kinds of posters and like little picture cards and behind the scenes props. They had the different posters when the movie came out in America. That movie originally was going to be the last Godzilla movie because I'm not much of a scholar. I'll just try. I'm kind of.
You seem like pretty scholarly to me on this stuff.
Yeah, I'm single. So anyway, so let's just done. We're done. Okay, I'm single.
I'm not, and I'm eating this up. So keep
right,
going.
so,
keep going.
The movie. What happened with that movie? It was they decided because of theater ticket sales at the time were kind of dwindling, and also the popularity of television, and also there were particularly shows like like Ultraman and Ultra 7. You can people like, oh, we can see giant monster stuff on a weekly basis. Even though Toho Studios were partially a funder of Tsuburaya Productions, that's this book here. Since we're talking about special effects behind the scenes stuff, the movie they decided, well, because they had a lot of other series of movies. Crazy Cats and like spy movies and comedy movies, but the giant monster movie things they were doing were kind of dwindling the ticket sales, and so it's like, well, maybe it's kind of ran its course. So they decided to just come up with this big, let's throw everything in there. And the movie is not really a character movie.
Okay.
It's more like it's an action plot. It's basically a rehash of a movie from a few years earlier called Kaiju Daisenso, which is called Invasion of Astro Monster, aka Monster Zero, which was kind of the first real merging of aliens. It was almost like a blueprint movie of everything that would come after that. Aliens controlling giant monsters to wreck the shit out of
Got it.
your town. So
you need Godzilla.
So they decided to do a rehash where it's basically it takes place in 1999. This is where the whole Monster Island thing came from, and also other people have pointed out this too. If you've ever seen books and there's a rock.
I've seen books.
There's books. You ever see? Like books and websites that are video games destroy all.
Okay.
Fill in the blank. It was that title. I think the Toho's original title for American or English distribution was called Operation Monsterland.
Okay.
Because technically it's called Monsterland. It happens in the year 1999.
Ooh.
And the Earth is at peace. There's harmony everywhere. There's this one island called Ogasawara Island near Japan, and we're flying to the moon, and that's when we thought the moon was all craggy with giant mountains and everything.
Got it.
Instead of flat.
Mm-hmm.
And we flying back and forth in there, and we have this utopian. The food, they're growing new marine life around at this time on this island. And to keep the peace, we wrangle up all these giant monsters around because they fuck up shit a lot. So we need to keep them on this island. And what happens, and these aliens get a hold of them, let the monsters loose, and they're destroying cities. And so they have to find a way to, they're these alien women called the Keloks, and they're all females. They're short females, and they're all in these glittery costumes, and they're really pretty but evil. And
sounds like my freshman year.
Yeah. But ching.
Okay.
And so that's what, and the way the movie works is that they get a hold of the control of these monsters, and they're going to send the monsters against this base at Mount Fuji. By the way, as a side note, we're talking about backdrops. This huge, beautiful, gigantic backdrop of Mount Fuji is in this film. If you ever see it, and all of a sudden they send out the aliens as to throw all the monsters in there, like the kitchen sink. They throw in the arch enemy, like all fandoms and all like fantasies have that arch enemy of that world, Lex Luthor and the Joker and all that. In Godzilla, it's this 3-headed space dragon called Kingu Ghidorah, however you want to pronounce it. Mm-hmm. And so they get a hold of him, and then there's this huge, what we've all been waiting for, this huge giant monster battle. All the monsters are coming at Ghidorah, and he lands in the middle. And this is where I had to say about the wires, because they can't have all the monsters rushing and everybody beating the crap out of each other. Once there's coordination, I mean, there's shots over here. The monsters are getting blasted over there and over there and over there because of Ghidra had like, I think I read 22 wires on him. He's got 2 tails, 2 wings, 3 heads, and there's a guy and has no arms. So the suit actor is like has a bar in front of his chest going like this, scrunched up in here, and he's just moving around like this on his feet, but he's got tons of wires. That suit was freaking huge.
And I'm guessing these actors could probably not see very easily out of these costumes.
Here, the heads, they're basically looking out of the necks.
Okay.
I mean, and then there's a monster called Anguirus where he's kind of on all fours. The guy's head is like here. He's mainly like looking down because it's like his head is like forward look like this.
Sure.
So he can't really see. And that's a story in itself about like suit acting, about like, you got to be.
JJ knows a few things about acting in a suit that gives him heat stroke. JJ, why don't you tell us about how awesome it was when you got to play a gorilla in a suit?
Well, so
That's
I
right.
thought that Tucker was going to be more professional and really move along the pacing, so I decided not to take the suit on and off each time because I was really sweaty. And we had these long bouts of time, and it was about 85 degrees out.
Was this for Mercedes Ray?
It was.
was.
And I was dressed like a giant gorilla.
Yep, I remember that. And by the way, I'll have to mention when we saw that, when you premiered that in 2007, during that fight with the gorilla suit, you were using Godzilla music.
Yeah.
There's 2 cues. You use music from Godzilla versus King Ghidorah and Godzilla versus Mothra.
And one guy in the theater goes, "Hey!" And it was Mikey Sunram.
It's like, but anyway, Destroy All Monsters. Because Toho made other movies. They made other sci-fi science fiction movies besides Godzilla movies. They did space movies, The Mysterians, Battle in Outer Space. They did sci-fi like mutant movies like The H-Man, The Human Vapor, Matango, which is also called Attack of the Mushroom People.
I love these old sci-fi
are
titles.
these all in the same idea
No,
of
they're not
person
all-
in a suit?
Well, no, some of them didn't really have suits. They were just like science fiction, like strange things. But there were other monster movies. There was Rodan, Mothra. There was this great sci-fi movie called great, I can't remember the name of it. Kaite Gunken, which is called undersea battleship in North America called Atragon.
We're going to need to make like a supplementary document to list all the titles that we've listed off in this thing.
See, I'm single. But anyway, it had this giant, and it's about this lost continent and this general that's building a super submarine called Atragon, and in the movie there's this to defend because he's from World War II and everything. God, I could just talk so much, but there's this giant serpent there called Manda. There was this movie. They had this one movie called Gorath. Crazy, same year as made as King Kong versus Godzilla. Basically, this giant asteroid is headed for Earth and it's going to crash into it. We need to move the Earth, so let's go to the South Pole. So we go to the South Pole, and in 3 months' time, how the fuck do you do this?
Move the Earth?
It's a combination of nuclear power and geothermal power. They basically turn the South Pole into these giant booster engines to push the Earth out of the way. I am not making this up. It's considered a kind of a classic because it's kind of like, all these like Armageddon kind of movies, but this was 1962.
Yeah, but Armageddon's believable, okay? Sending a bunch of roughnecks up to take on never mind.
But
My mom cried during that movie.
by the way, and they cut it out of the American version, but the Japanese version they threw in this giant while they're down the Arctic. Well, we need to. How can we spice up this movie? Throw a giant monster in there. This giant walrus called Maguma.
Walrus.
Now, it's
Interesting choice.
In the American version, they cut that movie out, and the thing out, and the things that happen around it don't make any sense because they took the thing out. So anyway,
Kind of happens in this podcast from time to time.
So originally, that monster was going to be in Destroy All Monsters, and then one of my favorites, there was a movie called Frankenstein Conquers the World. They did a Frankenstein movie. I'm sorry.
That's right.
Microphone.
Just rub it off.
Oh God.
There you go.
Spit.
Mikey's so excited he's frothing at the mouth
Yeah,
talking
I like
about
it.
Godzilla. We're going to want to talk about theater here pretty soon too, but this kind of ties into it.
I've got some more Godzilla related questions.
But
I
to
need
finish
to-
this up, but long story short, they had this giant fight at the end. The monsters win. Actually, they kill Ghidorah. he sinks into the earth, they kind of break his neck.
Spoiler alert, Mikey. Come on. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
This
But
movie
does he
came
ever
out.
come back though in another thing?
Yeah, actually, there's every Godzilla movie. There's only a few movies where you could probably turn it into a trilogy. Every other has its own kind of continuity, kind of again and again and again and again. It's kind of like James Bond.
So it's not like every Godzilla movie is connected to every other Godzilla movie.
No, so I mean, Destroy All Monsters is kind of its own thing because, in a way, that's another story. But anyway, that's Destroy All Monsters, and they tried to find. They kind of got okay. What suits can we use? We have a bigger budget. Let's build a couple new suits for Godzilla and Anguirus, but let's use these other suits. I mentioned Frankenstein Conquers the World. There's this monster. Right. This monster here called Baragon.
Ooh,
crazy looking dinosaur. Crazy looking dinosaur
He's got
monster
a whole big horn on his
big
front
horn.
of his
It glows
face.
too, and it has floppy ears. Frankenstein Conquers the World is a fucking awesome movie. And actually, it was originally going to be Frankenstein versus Godzilla, but they decided to not use it. But they wanted to keep the script, so they decided to make another monster instead. So they decided it's like whatever suits we can use and props we can use, and that's what originally that was going to be the last movie, but it did get popular, so they decided to keep on making movies, and it went and then it finally ended in 1975. You know, the 70s movies are kind of their own thing too, because they were made more for kids. They had the sensibilities of a lot of the 70s superhero shows and all that craziness at the time. It doesn't have the epic kind of feel, and sometimes those movies had stock footage from older movies because they were in dire straits of finances back in those days, because the movie industry back in the days was in rough shape.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, back then, could you imagine making a movie where at the time your box office receipts are all that you could count on?
Yeah.
You couldn't count on distribution for VHS.
Good point.
Maybe some television, but even then you're talking about pennies on the dollar. So let's talk about pennies on the dollar here real quick. In 1998, I wrote into to TriStar Pictures, who was releasing a Godzilla film,
which actually turned 20 this May. It was 20 years ago when that happened.
Snaps. So they sent me free tickets for an advanced screening of Godzilla at the Safari Theater. And I think it was like 3 days before it was due to actually open.
Starring Matthew Broderick and Hank Azaria.
Starring Matthew Broderick, Hank Azaria, Jean Reno.
He's probably my favorite part of that whole film.
Yeah, the French.
For what it is. Yep.
So your favorite part isn't Madison Square Garden?
Godzilla's a girl.
Laid some eggs.
Raptors.
So
Jurassic Park.
They sent me the ticket. They sent me wasn't just a ticket to get in, but also was like this big, like you're invited to a special premiere of Godzilla, and it came with a piece of celluloid from the film. So they cut up one of the prints. And so my friend Pete Hofelt and I went to it. My parents didn't know, so we took a cab. I would have been in 8th grade at the time, and I was supposed to be taking a cab. So we walked a block over, had the cab pick us up at a corner and drop us off at a corner, and you could tell the cab driver didn't think it was super legit. And there was maybe 25 people in the theater, and at that time, the Godzilla fever that people were feeling mainly came from a little ditty we like to call "We Could Be Heroes." Just for one day. So I go and see.
Where are the wallflowers these days?
You've got Bob Dylan being like, Jake, what are you doing? Come on. So I go and see that movie, and I did not care for it. So as a Godzilla superfan, how did you feel about the 98 Godzilla? Did you go into it with an open heart?
Yes. It was weird because I had actually a day or so, the design of that thing got leaked out onto T-shirts. I went to Media Play, and that thing was already on T-shirts, and I'm like, oh. That's what it looks like?
And that was supposed to be part of the big reveal is that Godzilla had, it was a much more traditional lizard-like.
Iguana-y.
He had like a butt chin. He had like a big, thick chin.
Big old chin like that tiger from the Jungle Book.
Yeah.
Lovey-dovey, I'm Zilla. Yeah, we call that, in the fandom, we call that Gino. Godzilla in name only. And also Zilla is called. How did I feel about the movie? I was just excited that a thing was that like that at all. That's my 1998 mindset. Love the beginning. I love the because I love ominous. It's like, okay, you need ominous music. You need open space. You need
great use of stock footage
of vast oceans. Because thing about giant monsters I love is because I have a love also for open space. I love ominous open spaces and seeing these giant things moving around in giant open spaces. So when I saw that, and then eventually, as it went on, and was like, okay, yes, giant monster, but it's like, but then he was running like,
like a velociraptor, like a giant velociraptor.
And then I was more like, this is not Godzilla. I walked out of there not like wanting to slit my wrists, but because but I was like,
definitely a situation where the studio that made it didn't quite get the essence of
Dean
what Godzilla
Devlin
was.
And they talked a good talk during the promotion of the film. Devlin and Emmerich. I mean, eventually Toho, did approve the design. They were the story is they were kind of taken aback by it. But it was they were trying to capitalize on the JP on the park.
Yep, I was gonna say we can thank Steven Spielberg because Jurassic Park is this giant hit, and they're like, people want to see big monsters.
Yeah,
let's get this thing moving. Here's my analysis of the 1998 Godzilla,
which I wish I would have seen when Rift Tracks did.
It's brilliant.
Yes, damn right. But before you start, I will say the cartoon that came on Fox Kids of that, there was 40 episodes, that was a little more in the spirit of the thing, because it's like, it was cool, and I actually own it on, obviously I own it on DVD, but that movie kind of was in the spirit, and actually, wow, they're on a boat driving around, kind of like the old Hanna-Barbera Godzilla. There's no Godzuki. But all these and all the crazy mutant monsters that they going around the earth at different times, like they were actually really cool. And the people who made the cartoon were more fans, but the movie, yeah. So it's got a great buildup, right? Yeah.
If you never saw Godzilla through the whole movie, I'd be like, damn, that was a strong choice for them to make. I want the payoff, but here are the two things that bothered me the most. Number one, I hated how all of a sudden he'd go around a corner and he'd hide. They'd be like, "Where'd he go? Where'd he go? We don't know. Where's Godzilla?"
Yes,
that's bullshit. The size of that thing, you're not gonna hide anything.
Yes.
Number two, I hate any movie where some random scientist or civilian can somehow stay alive, even though thousands of other people are being killed by being stomped, with feet.
Yes.
Yet somehow they can drive a taxi cab around
through his legs, right?
Yeah,
don't they break
his toes at one point?
Yeah, George.
Oh, that's because it's Hank Azaria who plays a character named Animal. Survives because he happens to be between Godzilla's toes.
Yeah,
and then he's got that. I survived.
That was a shot perfectly made for the trailer.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a garbage movie. I'm also going to go on record here of saying I'm not a huge fan of the other one that came out. What year was that? The 2014? It's closer to what I wanted, but what's the main guy who's in that?
Aaron. He played Quicksilver in Avengers: Age of Ultron.
Yeah, which is my least favorite part of that movie.
Oh, really?
Aaron Johnson. Is it Aaron Johnson?
Aaron Taylor
Johnson.
Dash Johnson.
Yeah. I don't like him, and I don't like the way he treated Walter White in that movie.
I think, I heard
Breaking
Bryan
Bad
Cranston
reference.
right when he got done with Breaking Bad. put the wig on, and he went over that. But yeah, even he said that was a mistake killing him.
Yes.
midway through the thing.
I would
He's
have
the
much
most
rather
interesting part
been
of
with
it.
him
Yes.
and Ken Watanabe the whole time.
Yep.
Yes.
Those two actors are the ones I wanted to see, but
Okay.
we got this sort of like stoic soldier guy that wasn't nearly as interesting as the other characters.
It was flawed, but it was the human story. I see. What they were trying to do. Gareth Edwards directed that because he also went on and did Rogue One. So now he had two things to cross off his bucket list. Yeah, there was. I mean, that movie. Before that, when I didn't think that was ever going to happen, it was actually this year the 10th anniversary of Cloverfield. Now, in my getting all cerebral about it, I'm like, this is more of a remake this is more of an American remake of Godzilla than the actual one, if you look at it through way. And even J.J. Abrams, who was the producer behind it, that was his intention. It's like, okay, the original Godzilla was made with these kind of certain issues going on at the time, and you had this fear and survivor guilt. Okay, what do we got in our day? He wanted an American monster, number one, and two, there was 9/11 that happened. So when you watch that movie, you saw images, you saw the fear and the terror of 9/11. I mean, maybe not overtly, but yeah. But then the 2014 came along, and I had seen what Gareth Edwards did with Monsters, the movie he made before that, which was cool, kind of indie kind of film. You know, he did all the special effects. Have you the two ever seen that one?
It, yeah.
Yeah.
I understand why he was a front runner for Godzilla.
Yeah, because they saw that movie, the tone and the atmosphere and the shots, and they're like, that's what we want. That's what Thomas Tull, the executive producer of Legendary, he's like, we want that. Now, I do still like it. It had these moments. I mean, as I watched
The
it more,
monster battles are sweet.
Yeah, because it was restrained, and that's what people pissed and moan about. It was like, because it's like, and then cut away. He wanted to show Gareth Edwards purposely, whether you liked it or not, he wanted to show aftermath of that. He didn't want you to, to splooge on you all at once, all the things. Then he thought, well, people are going to get bored. Because then when the monster movie finally happened, my favorite scene is when you see the Queen Muto laying her eggs, and then the soldiers are there in the cities after they've dropped down, I thought that was a cool shot too.
That was with like the red smoke, right?
With the red smoke and the 2001 music playing in the background, and and they're going between these two monsters that have for hours just have turned the town into just a fucking wasteland. And then when so you had that shot where the soldiers are going like this, and then finally all of a sudden you hear there's Godzilla in the smoke, and you hear that piano boom. It's almost like this is what I've been waiting for, this moment of atmosphere and music. You hear this drone in the background, and then you see Godzilla coming through the smoke, laying down, and just that humongous theater shaking roar. I almost had to change my pants. That was like my favorite thing of like, this is the scene, just the scene that I have waited for to see on the fucking big screen nearly all my life. And then he went to town, and then people went goo goo gaga when you finally showing his radioactive breath. And then finally, for those of you, sorry to spoil it if you haven't seen it, the kiss of death.
Yeah.
Even I didn't see that coming. I went
Where he basically shoots his fire down the throat.
down the throat when yeah.
I felt
so,
the same way about the first Avengers movie, when the Avengers are finally all together in New York City, and
they're in a circle,
and Captain America,
when the Hulk takes down that Chitauri worm monster thing, and then they're all panicking like, and then Hulk roars, and you see the circle. It's like that's what you've been waiting for.
As a kid, I was waiting for that forever.
Here's my pitch. So,
can I say one more thing before you started?
Yes.
Your friend Scotch. The third time I saw that film, I went to when movies are out for a while and then they get shoved off to the smaller theaters at West Acres and Century Cinema. I went to see it a third time. Went down to the front row of the smaller theater. Who do I see at the very end? Your buddy Scotch and another friend.
And I bet I know he liked it.
It was probably Britta, wasn't it?
No,
it was another guy.
Yeah, he's got a couple friends who are
Britta. Yep,
who
that's
love
exactly
it.
who it is.
So anyway,
so Godzilla is sort of it's a cautionary tale, right? So these movies became popular after World War II because we've started experimenting with nuclear technology as a weapon, and what can that awaken? Not just what it can awaken in man, but what it can awaken in your nightmare.
Yeah, in your nightmare, in nature. I mean, it was in the natural world. I mean, yeah, because I listen. There's a podcast I'm interested in. I mean, I'm a secular guy. But I am interested in. There's a guy, an author, I like, named Dr. Robert Price. He's a biblical scholar, but he comes at it from a secular point of view because he's a biblical critic. He's a Jesus mythicist. Won't go down that, but he said there's a book he put out about the people who, the Rapture, the Left Behind series. He did a book kind of critiquing all that called The Paperback Apocalypse: How the Christian Church Got Left Behind. But he said in his podcast, a podcast called The Bible Geek, he said that he thinks the best movies that represent like end times things, he goes, because he's a geek too of like of H.P. Lovecraft and Cthulhu and all that, and all kinds of sci-fi and Conan the Barbarian books. He said it's like it's not the Left Behind series, it's all those giant monster movies, because they came out of the survivor guilt of all these people, like because surviving all of these fire bombs and atomic and the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs, and they went right back to this primal ancient symbolism of giant monsters destroying their world and build and not knowing what the fuck to do about it.
It's always interesting when how things come out of Japan, especially after World War II, because I consider Japan one of the first post-apocalyptic countries on this planet, because no one else has had two major cities that were there 1 second and then were gone the next second. That's only ever happened, twice in our history, and both to the same country. And the sort of demarcation point in their culture between that, before what came before that and what came after that, is really intensely interesting. The same concepts spurred on Marvel Comics in the U.S. because so many of the superheroes, the Hulk and Spider-Man, were from like radioactive tests and scientific tests that were dealing with different like weaponry. The Hulk was testing a gamma radiation bomb, and that's what turned him into it. So it kind of makes me go, I'm interested to see, not that I'm interested to see what new tragedies will befall our race, but what will come out of our pop culture after those things happen. And 9/11, as you said, was a very big turning point in a lot of our visual language.
So here's the point I'm going to get at here.
Okay.
I don't think that audiences nowadays will buy a nuclear holocaust as the reason that one of these monsters is awoken, because we've seen Chernobyl, we've seen other meltdowns. I think if I were a Hollywood writer, I would liken it to cell phone technology, and about how we've built up all this technology and we're using all of these different signals, and eventually, a signal is crowded, and so we use a new signal, and we're pushing all of this wireless technology to the nth degree. And so that is the thing. It creates a hum, and the hum is what awakens some of these creatures. And so our quest to be so technologically savvy turns out to be our undoing.
Cool.
You can take that one to the bank, Hollywood. And side note, I bumped into you at Kong Skull Island, and
I still haven't seen that.
When you bumped into me? Really?
When you saw it, yeah,
I did. Oh, I didn't. I didn't. I
don't think positive.
I did. But
you saw Kong Skull Island, right?
Damn right I did.
Yeah, in the theater, right?
Fucking right I did.
Like day
back
one,
row, middle seat. Try and pull me out.
I'm pretty sure I bumped into you at it.
I don't know. I don't remember seeing you. I saw it like the Friday.
You might have been in the throes of ecstasy at that moment.
No, because you went to an early morning screening, right?
Yeah.
So did I. I got done with my show at like 9 a.m. and I saw like a 9:15 screening that Friday.
You probably saw it in a different theater than I did.
Oh, sorry.
I went to Century.
Me too.
Okay.
In the hallway?
So I'm going senile.
So maybe I bumped into you in the hallway.
I don't remember. But anyway,
because you're too busy probably geeking out. But that is obviously going to usher, that's the first one. Godzilla's the first one, but this is the one that really says, hey, we've got a shared universe coming up here that's going to get pretty intense.
I mean, you had Dark Universe.
Yeah, it didn't really go anywhere.
They wanted to do that, and then nothing to have of that. Even though I didn't think The Mummy was terrible.
I have a score to settle with JG on that, by the way, before you
go. Whoa. You didn't think The Mummy was terrible?
It had terrible things, and I do understand your point. It was Tom Cruise playing Tom Cruise.
No, but I have a score to settle with JJ.
All right.
JJ, the Benicio del Toro Wolfman, is not a part of the Dark Universe. It never was, and you told me
really?
it was.
I was almost positive that was part of the beginning of what they were starting with.
Untold, I think they wanted to do
the Mummy was the first one of the Dark Universe, and the only one that's been made of the Dark Universe.
So,
But okay,
100% positive
of maybe what they're calling the Dark Universe. But I swear to God that Universal at one point, the Wolfman was the first, and they were going to reignite all of these old franchises. And maybe it wasn't a universe. Maybe it was just a rehash of some of their famous monster
movies. Could have been
movies.
like their first failed attempt at doing it, and then they tried to restart again. But The Mummy with Tom Cruise isn't connected to the Benicio del Toro Wolfman.
No, it's
not. They
not.
don't share a universe.
No, but
okay.
So, but
side note,
they don't settled.
They won't ever again because it's fucking garbage and it's they're all so bad.
Oh well,
why can't they get something like that right?
So and there's been ups and downs with the DC universe, right?
Mm-hmm. Mostly downs.
So it's technically the MonsterVerse from legendary Warner Brothers technically is the only other successful shared universe besides all the crazy Marvels. Which I do like. I love watching them in the theaters. But I mean, these MonsterVerse, there's only going to be two more after Kong Skull Island. There's going to be the one that you just had a trailer come out at Comic-Con.
Which looks amazing.
Oh, yeah.
Looks really good.
Yes, and then Godzilla versus Kong, which, boy, that's a story where I had to eat crow with Tucker. Tucker for years is like, because he loved King Kong versus Godzilla, it's like, I want them to make a new version. And I got all high and mighty and big shot puffy, and I'm like, that's never going to happen again because here's why that happened. Here's why it happened. And then 2 days before I closed on my house in October 2015, they announced it. And I go, what?
Now, lest we forget, it's technically not King Kong versus Godzilla. It's Kong because they don't have the rights to King Kong.
Exactly.
Really?
Right.
Yeah. I did not know that.
Yeah. They can't call it King Kong. It's Kong.
What? That's why the whole movie, they're like, Kong is king of this island.
Right.
They found some really interesting things to work around saying King Kong.
How does that work? So what is it that you can do absolutely everything exactly like before except just don't use king in the name?
Right.
Who owns the copyright to King Kong?
Universal RKO, and it's Warner Brothers that are doing this. Because originally, I guess, there was a big hubbub that originally was Legendary is right now partner with Universal, but for these other MonsterVerse movies, they're going to stick with Warner Brothers.
Okay.
So,
side note, there's a big difference between even the largest King Kong we've ever seen and Kong from Skull. I mean,
he's still growing
10 times the size.
He's still growing. John C. Reilly mentioned that was a little plug.
Well, and the Godzilla of the newest Godzilla is way bigger in size than the other Godzillas are.
Yeah.
I saw a graph that just showed that they're like, let's just make sure this Godzilla is just way bigger than the other ones.
Yeah.
Back to King Kong versus Godzilla, and I'm pretty sure you told me this already, that it wasn't true that there were multiple endings of the movie, right? So there was only ever the one ending.
That's why I brought books. In old books, pretty much this book, if you look it up, it has that lie. And there's in other older books, it had that lie. No, at the original, they fall off the cliff, like in a bunch of other movies. Both monsters fall off the cliff. You see King Kong emerging from the ocean, and he swims. Godzilla's nowhere to be found. It's right there. Turn that page.
So are we to assume that Godzilla died or Godzilla swam away underneath the ocean?
He's just gone.
Yeah, who won? That depended upon where, I'm reading from page 31 of this book, Godzilla.
Amen.
Who won? That depended upon where in the world you saw the movie. In the United States, King Kong came out the victor. Back in Japan, however, the homegrown monster came out on top, Godzilla. And part of me always wanting them to do a new King Kong versus Godzilla was that I wish that they would have 3 different prints of the movie. one where King Kong wins, one where Godzilla wins, and one where the humans win.
Kind of like what Clue did.
Except that you don't know which one you're attending.
Yeah.
So you go in.
That's kind of funky.
That's how you just find it that way.
I don't know why more places don't do that. I would actually, if I was a major Hollywood movie maker, I would make a different ending for the the East Coast versus the West Coast, and not tell anybody, and see how much you can mess with people's minds.
It's almost like remember those old What If books? Like if you turn to this page, this is the ending you're going to have.
Choose your own adventure.
I really worry that that's actually the future of movies is allowing the audience to have a say in how the plot goes. And I'm like, you're already ruining it in test screenings.
Especially if the audience has to agree together, so they have to discuss it.
Yeah.
So I think Paul Giamatti should save her from the grass.
But Lady in the Water. But Kong Skull Island, big fun movie. The editing. The editing just moves so quick. It's not very character driven. There's that was a complaint about it, but I mean, it's a lot more fun. I mean, than the 2014 Godzilla, and to imagine, and since it's a shared universe movie, you saw that little stinger at the end. Some people didn't get that or didn't stay; they left. But some people in the know, they saw that little stinger at the end, and I'm like, to know that movie got an Oscar nomination. Mm-hmm. When I saw that, and again, brains splattered on the back of the fucking wall. I went like, because that stinger at the end, because it's like, Kong is not the only king. You saw cave paintings of Godzilla and Rodan, Mothra, and Ghidorah, and I'm like, wow, a movie that references King Ghidorah at the end got an Oscar nomination. Even though I was being a realist too, I'm like, oh, Blade Runner's gonna get it, duh. But it got nominated. I'm like, okay, because the special effects was fun, and now the next movie is that's what I was waiting for during Comic-Con. It came out a week after I got back from G-Fest, and and I'm like, and it's like, okay, you people pissed and moaned about wanting more monster action, ask and ye shall receive.
You know what, really?
And there's actually going to be, I'm sorry, Michael Dougherty, the director, he directed Krampus and Trick or Treat and all that. He said that, there is going to be more monsters than just this. So there's people in the fandom going, because when they showed the first still from that movie, Godzilla firing his fire up in the air, the director said that picture is a call to arms. So I'm like, if they don't spoil anything with any other coming up trailers, and they tell us, and we found out at the last minute, they got the rights from Toho to use other monsters coming out of the earth to fight Ghidorah at the end, and people are going to be creaming their jeans.
I was going to say, coming into the earth will be Mikey Sunram.
Badoom ching.
So my biggest beef with Kong Skull Island is I knew that there's going to be a stinger at the end, right? Because there's got to be.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there and
it moves fast. It's like a minute and a half,
and it comes at the tail end of the credits. And it was poor placement on their part because
they should have put those credits.
Yes.
Me too. And like, remember at the end of Guardians of the Galaxy when they had the stinger with Howard the Duck, and then afterward, Howard the Duck, care of da-da-da-da. Yep. They should have done that because at the end, for those of you who don't have seen, after 5 minutes of credits, images of Godzilla, King Ghidorah, Rodan, and Mothra owned by Toho Studios. It gives it away right there. And they should have had that at the end after the stinger because it has cave paint. They showing cave paintings, and then it cuts to black. You hear Godzilla's roar. They should have had that. So giant monsters. Giant monsters are kind of in the hip now because we had Pacific Rim recently, or not Uprising, but from Del Toro, who was a fan of that stuff and the giant robot.
I love Pacific Rim.
That first one, that's a huge fucking love letter because it was a combination of that and giant monsters, and the love of Japanese like 70s anime like that I've been kind of catching up on recently, Mazinger Z and Gaia King, the Shogun Warriors, Ray Dean, Dragoon.
We're really going to need an appendix for this one.
Yes. Yeah. But that Uprising, it was fun. It was I've listened to fans of podcasts who said that movie, I said that's the movie I wish the first one was. They like it better than the first one. And other people have said that movie is what people who didn't like the first one thought it was. But Del Toro, but when I heard about that movie coming out, I was just going, oh God. And when I saw it each time, one day a week, that the weekend it came out, the Friday and Saturday and Sunday, and saw it with different friends. Brad Delzer came to it.
Okay.
On like the final day I came to it, my friend Mark Seba was next to me. And then I saw Brad, should I go to Pacific Rim or this other artsy-fartsy movie? And I
I've
see
seen
him come
Doubt
in.
about 8 times.
And then
but
Brad Delzer, and I see Brad Delzer to go, hey, Brad, don't sit alone. Come next to me here. So, but anyway, yeah. But, being a giant monster fan, I mean, it's kind of a cool clique because for years, I mean, we have the superhero movies,
Yep.
Harry Potter, and we have all these books, Divergent and, and the Hunger Games being made into movies and, Twilight and all that romance.
it just goes to show that even at the age Godzilla is now, he's still got some firepower behind him.
Yeah. Reese, before we wrap up this monster talk, Toho actually made they had the 50th anniversary film 2004 called Final Wars, which is a fucking up down train wreck. I mean, you could go on forever. It shouldn't have been it has some cool things in it, but you were talking about the 1998 movie.
Mm-hmm.
It was sort of, they tried to make a hipster remake of Destroy All Monsters.
Okay.
And what happened in that movie, these aliens had the TriStar Godzilla in it. They beam him down to fight the real Godzilla after they let him loose from the Arctic. And he jumps at him. Godzilla swipes his tail, boom, and kills him. And
Kills Gino, right?
Gino, he and then he fires his breath and explodes him.
So
There is a scene that exists in that.
So
What a
Gino's
fitting-
kind of like the Jar Jar Binks of Godzilla, almost.
Yeah. But now in 2016, it was the 60th anniversary a few years ago. They made, and I recommend this, Shin Godzilla came out. Now this one is even bigger. It was made by a guy named Hideki Anno. Have you ever heard of the anime Evangelion?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's the maker that that movie has a lot of anime sensibilities, and Godzilla is, he's not, the difference between that one and the legendary Godzilla, someone pointed out, is that the legendary Godzilla, he's like this ancient giant animal. And, he's nuclear, but he's awakened from nuclear energy and test, but he's kind of an ancient animal like all these other giant monsters from the past. This Godzilla, I recommend seeing Shin Godzilla. It's almost like The West Wing. It's a disaster film. It's
Is Godzilla constantly walking
The
around
West
talking?
Wing, written by Aaron Sorkin?
because there's tons of politics, and it's like
okay.
what if you remade the original one today? What happened recently? The meltdown that happened recently, those tidal, the tsunami disasters that happened, the Fukushima, the meltdown that happened in recent years. This Godzilla is not an animal. This is a monster. This is a ginormous freak. When he first comes out, he's like a tadpole that has like no legs and everything, and he grows and grows. He's bigger than the legendary, and they kind of amplify the mutation aspect of Godzilla. And when he finally unleashes his breath, like they're trying to, he's CGI motion capture too in that. Not the greatest at times, but he's even bigger than the legendary Godzilla. And he looks like he's burnt, and he's like walking like this. He's tiny arms, and when he's full size, and just a lot of that movie is about the politics of like how we don't know what to do. We don't know how to fix this, so let's go to another meeting. Let's go to another meeting. Let's go to another meeting. So there's all these politics. If you watch the film,
which is probably a realistic idea of what would happen if a giant monster.
Yeah, because it's like,
arrived.
how the fuck are we going to deal with this? We don't know how to deal with this. So
France does not want to be involved.
yes, and so there's a scene when you can look it up on YouTube when he finally unleashes his breath. The whole city is just wiped. This part of the city is just wiped out when they're trying to bomb him. And this Godzilla, when he opens his mouth, there's no tongue. He opens his mouth like the Predator, like this bottom of his jaw opens, and this smoke billows out, and he has these fish shark eyes that like cover themselves, like when a shark bites you, go whoop, and that's what it happened. And then finally at the end, I won't spoil it for you. Like it came out on Funimation and actually had a limited theatrical release in America. I saw it at the West Acres Cinema in October 2016. And so yeah, that movie it might be boring, but I mean, it was different.
I could see a political situation with Godzilla where Trump goes, "Hello, America. Say hello to my new vice president, this
He's the
giant monster.
He's the greatest.
He's the greatest monster ever.
He's going to make huge. He's going to make
He's huge.
He's going to make America huge again.
Gonna send him to China."
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to what's coming. I mean, that trailer that came out recently from Comic-Con, that was just a trailer. I mean, the movie could still have a bad human story.
Plenty of movies where the trailer's
but it's going to
better.
bring in the hipsters because it's Millie Bobby Brown's first role. It's Charlie Danster. He had a little Game of Thrones thing. Long live the king. And people, I've watched reaction videos of people like, oh, it's like, oh, he said that thing. That's Game of Thrones. So, but yeah, that's me, and it's kind of ruined my life. So.
It's not ruined.
Bye-bye.
It's made it better.
We're
Made
gonna
better.
So we gotta wrap this thing up. But I'm
Okay.
gonna give a quick pitch for this. You do a lot of stuff over at Theater B.
Yes.
I've seen you on stage. One of my favorite roles you were in, Almost Maine. Just fantastic in that.
I just got done with the Moors recently.
Which is my
Yep.
favorite Mikey role, is the Moors. Your performance in that was
Yeah.
fantastic.
You're also a guru when it comes to getting great emotion out of a lighting design too. I will note that. Like
wow.
So Mikey
That's
is a
your-
fellow ensemble member with me at Theater B, and oftentimes Mikey is handling a lot of the lighting for a lot of
Yeah.
our shows. So if you've seen a B show, you've probably seen a Mikey Sunram lighting schematic.
Yeah, I'm not, this isn't a false modesty, trust me, but I'm not as good of a lighting designer as I'd like to be, because when I went to school in 94 to 99 at NDSU, that's when before we had all this. I haven't kept up with software, and I haven't kept up with a lot of the newer lights and equipment. I know other lighting designers in town that are way more knowledgeable than I am. A lot of my lighting designs end up kind of being more practical a lot of times and more atmospheric. I've had luck with next fall. That's one I'm kind of proud of.
I think that you're selling yourself short, because I know that you've also worked under the constraints of like, well, I can't plug in another instrument or I'll blow the fuses. So
I only have so many dimmers, so how can I two for these together?
Yep.
Because to kill two birds with one stone. So
appreciate the lighting next time you go see a Theater B show, and you'll probably see
Yeah.
Mikey's name in the program.
I've only acted in a few, and but I've been a Theater B guy for years now. And
Correct me if I'm wrong. I think you're doing the lighting for Santaland Diaries, aren't you?
Oh, wow, what the? Yeah.
I believe you are.
Damn, amen.
If you've got a thinning gobo, I would certainly appreciate that. I don't know if they make those. If not, maybe that's how you can make your big bucks there, Mikey.
Yeah.
Okay, so as we leave, other than Godzilla, who's your favorite giant monster?
My favorite giant monster. Maybe
Okay. Mm-hmm.
this guy Rodan. Probably my favorite. My favorite. One of my top favorite kaiju movies of all time is the original Rodan from 1956.
And he looks like a pterodactyl.
Yep, and he's going to be in the next movie. He comes out of a volcano.
He's in the trailer. It's a beautiful shot.
Yeah, and what he perfectly looks like. I may have seen a little behind the scenes maquette. Other giant monsters, like I do like Baragon. That one. I do like Mechagodzilla. I do like Mechagodzilla.
Mechagodzilla's
My
awesome.
1974. That's my favorite 70s Godzilla movie.
Godzilla gets his ass kicked at the beginning of the movie.
Because it's like every fandom has
It's
some
bloody.
villain where he pretends to be you always have a robot version of every cartoon series, every superhero, like any fandom always has the robot version of this certain central figure. So of course, because they had King Kong Escapes, they had a Mechanicon.
Mm-hmm.
That was a Toho film. Mechagodzilla.
Godzilla rules.
My other 1989, there was my favorite Godzilla movie visually is called Godzilla vs. Biollante, and it was the second movie of the second string of movies made in the 80s and 90s. And that movie, the monster is basically a cross between a plant, like Godzilla's cells crossed with a rose. And at the end, he is this ginormous, he dwarfs Godzilla. And that movie's actually turning 30 years old next year. And Yeah, he looks from certain angles he looks like a Muppet. But he's got these giant tentacles and he spews acid, and his head is just this like alligator mouth that almost swallows Godzilla. He's just tons and tons of teeth. And so, Biollante is cool. It's a weird name. It's a long story to get. I can't get into it right now. But
sounds like a delicious flavor of gelato. I'll have Biollante, please.
In
a waffle
That
cone.
sounds like the name Beyonce was going to use and then settled on Beyonce after.
Gelato. Brad Delzer loved gelato. He said, ice cream can suck a dick. I love we had gelato one tech day from Nicole's. He's like, ice cream can suck a dick.
Ice cream can suck a dick. Yeah.
Gelato's, Brad. You love anything fancy.
Yeah, you'll have any dessert you put in front of you, Brad.
It has some kind of
lie.
hipster name, yeah.
All right, Mikey, thank you very much for coming on. Next time, I promise we'll talk about something other than giant monsters. I feel like we barely got into the mythos.
I kind of, it's like, oh God, it's like this is, because other than that, what am I interested in? Cartoons and voice acting and walking and drinking water and producing carbon dioxide.
Stay tuned for Mikey's next podcast, Water.
Water.
H2O, really?
Waka waka.
Thanks for being a guest, Mikey.
Thanks very much, Jay.
JJ Meets World.
Well, that does it for this episode, gang. Thank you so much for going on this journey through Godzilla with us. I want to tell you about a couple things real quick. Number one, we have created over 50 hours of free content. Free. You hear that? Free. Free. But we do ask this. We're not going to make you pay for episodes, but if you'd like to donate to these episodes, if you like what we're doing and want to help us continue doing it, we have to pay rent on the studio. We have to buy equipment. We have to host this online. You can go to patreon.com/JJMeetsWorld. And you can throw us a couple of bucks. You could have an ongoing every single month, give us a little something, or you can just give us one big lump sum when you want. And we're talking about $1, $2, $5, $10. It doesn't matter. A shout out to those folks who have already gone on there and donated. We certainly appreciate it. Every little bit helps. So patreon.com/JJMeetsWorld. You can also find it. We post links on our Facebook. By the way, we're also on Twitter, so you can find us there as well. If you want to find my producer, the man who handles all of the background stuff on every single episode, you are going to go to moonbasemaria.com to check out Tucker Lucas's work. Moonbasemaria.com. You can see movies of me dressed like a giant baby and all of his other great work. I suggest The Little Donkey is a really wonderful short film that Tucker did that only took him about 5 years to complete. If you want to reach out to me, your host with the most, you go to linebenders.com. We have got a lot of great stuff coming up for Linebenders, including a schedule of all of our upcoming shows. You can also find Linebenders on Facebook. And last, but certainly not least, at the beginning of this episode, I tried to have a really, really good Godzilla roar. It didn't end up the way I'd like to, so I think what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to do this. If Godzilla were into jazz, it would sound a little like... Play it. I'm eating Tokyo.